This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
They say that a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Like, that's how a shop works too. If you've got one process that's really slow, it doesn't matter how much you improve the other ones, it's still going to be slow.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back. This is Kevin Dubois. In the previous podcast for Do It for a Living, you may have heard the interview with me and Reid, and we explained that we were going to be involved with Do It for a Living moving forward. The plan forward is I will be doing many of the interviews, and Reid will also be participating on a lesser scale. And we also have another person that will be participating. His name's Todd Earsley. Todd is my business partner in MSA, and he will be generating content. And most of the content he's going to be doing is going to be related to business tips, book reviews, tool reviews, and etc. And I'll let him explain forward what he will be doing. Todd, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing great, Kevin.
Cool. So, Todd, go ahead and tell us about yourself and your business, and how did you get started? What's your background? Kind of give us an idea of who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Lubbock, Texas. Went there, just grew up there and went to high school through there. And so didn't move on to Dallas until after I graduated high school. But yeah, growing up as a kid, I was always around cars, like always working on them, always hanging out with my dad. We've got pictures of me like reading magazines before I could actually read, just kind of looking at pictures, trying to emulate him. And so a lot of the stuff that I got, out of cars was just being raised in a car family. My dad always had really cool cars. My mom always had really cool cars. And it's just kind of something that's always been in my blood. So like from a very, very, very early age, I was always kind of tinkering with stuff, and we were working on my dad's car like all the time. And so kind of moving forward a bit, got my first car when I was 15 out of a barn. It was like a barn find Camaro. And my dad and I spent, my high school career restoring that car. And so, that was like a really cool experience, learning a lot, watching him do stuff, like seeing how an engine's actually built and like how much time it actually takes to do some of this stuff. And, we did like the typical car restoration. We took it all the way down. We put all the bolts in little baggies, and we took tons of pictures, like just trying to figure out, all the steps that it takes to take something apart and put it back together. It's a bunch of work. And so spent like 2.5 years. We actually restored it. We restored it fully, and then we went back and beefed up the engine a little bit because it was really weak. So did that through high school. And then I was big into like the 4x4s and stereo stuff. Like I know you said, everybody kind of dabbles with stereos and puts like huge subwoofers in their car, and they think they're so cool. And like now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, oh my God, like those things are so annoying. But yeah, did a lot of that in high school. I also did the work program when I was in high school. So I got to spend, I'd go to class like a little bit during the day, and then you get off early and go to work. And so that was something, my parents were like, you're going to have to learn, what a dollar is worth, And so my first job, like my first real job was, I was a sacker at a grocery store, and then moved on to, I worked at Mailboxes, etc., which is now like the UPS store. So worked like all through high school, going to work, going to school, hanging around, working on cars, kind of the typical stuff. And then when I went off to college, I actually moved to Dallas to go to college, and I majored in mechanical engineering and math. So I did a double major just because when you do engineering, you can add on like one math class a semester and you get a math degree. So I really like math. I really like numbers. And it was like a ton of fun doing that stuff. And I also did the work program in college as well. So they did a co-op program with engineering businesses around the Dallas area. And so the first one I did was Tyco Electronics. that was right when they kind of like got split off. Tyco was a huge company. Now they're 3 or 4 different companies. And I was doing wind tunnel testing on their motherboards and circuit boards that they were producing. So that was like a really fun job with, we had thermal cabinets where we could heat them up to 115 degrees and, run them full bore and then drop the temperature down to like negative 30, within an hour, and keep running those motherboards and seeing, how they performed and how they were designed. So that was a lot of fun. And then I moved on to a business called Dallas Woodcraft, which has since closed, but they brought me on as a process improvement engineer. So I actually went to that job and went through their entire process, and I pretty much just kind of hung around and took notes of like how they were manufacturing picture frames for, just like home picture frames. And, that job was really cool and really gave me an insight into the operations of a business and like optimizing performance. And that was when I first got introduced to the book, The Goal, which has been mentioned several times here and is like the Bible on process improvement books within this industry. And then, through college, I also did Mini Baja, which is similar to the Formula SAE that you mentioned earlier, but it's a Baja car. So it's an it's a 4-wheel drive, like Baja car that we built from scratch. And our team was really weak. It was just me and another guy, like bending tubes and welding stuff together. So that was more of just kind of like a fun deal. We never produced a car that we could take to competition, which kind of sucked, but it was a fun, like, learning how to weld and staying up late in the shop at school and just like, having fun and building stuff was always a lot of fun. And so after college, after I graduated, I worked in aerospace as well. So, this kind of gets into the fun airplane stuff. So I worked for a company outside of Dallas that did surveillance, reconnaissance, and information stuff. So they put like cameras and everything on airplanes. And I worked as a liaison engineer out there, which pretty much means that I designed repairs when the mechanics would mess stuff up. So that job was like super fast paced, really busy. You never really knew what you were going to be working on because new stuff would come in. I mean, we were working just as things messed up because it was, always important to get that done so they could stay on schedule. And so, I moved out, I moved into the suburbs, I bought a house, I got a dog, and that was when I started kind of racing a little more. And, that job, it was so cool, but like I really, really, really enjoyed it, but it was a lot of work. Like it was super stressful. You're always running around, it was like a 5 a.m. to whenever you were done kind of job. So you really had to be passionate about doing it. And it was a ton of fun, but it was just like nonstop problems. Like everything you dealt with was a problem. And so, when I started working out there, that's when, you and I met, I bought an Evo. That was 07. I think it was like the summer of 07 maybe when I graduated, and got an Evo. I got like one of the last ones they had on the lot in 2006. So that was like one of the last brand new cars that they had of the Evo 9 model. And I had brought it to you to like start working on it. So that's when, we had met when you were still working out of your house in your garage. So I remember hanging out in your garage and like, Lauren being there and just sitting on your garage, like just kind of hanging out as you're doing, lowering springs and intake and exhaust and then going out on the street and tuning it. So that was, that's how you and I met a long time ago.
And that was a black Evo. For people who are not familiar with the car Todd drives now, it is not the same one. So. Yeah.
So that was the first Evo that I had. And, getting back to like working the corporate job was like awesome. Like going, having a steady paycheck. It was kind of weird how they did it. It was a salary-based job, but they paid us hourly. So you signed a contract for a salary job for X number of hours a year, and then they just divided that out, and that was your hourly rate. And so if you worked 80 hours a week, you got 80 hours worth of money. And so it was like, we're making tons of money, and that was the best part of it was, I could afford to race a car doing that. And so, that busy schedule translated into more money, which translated into, when I could get a break, I could go racing. So, that job was a lot of fun, working out there in aerospace, cool people, cool projects, cool planes, just all around good time. And I worked there that was 3.5 years, almost 4 years, I think, that I was working there. And I kind of noticed, like, you couldn't move up. It was so difficult to move up in that company. And I think that's kind of a lot of the aerospace. You get into that job and it's like, man, this is excellent. Health benefits, good pay, cool work, because you're working for the government. So you pretty much, there's always going to be work as an American working for the military. And so I was looking around and I was like, man, the only real way to move up in this company is you just got to wait for somebody above you has to die, and then everybody else moves up. Yeah. Like, you just have to last longer than the rest of the people. And I didn't see a single person get promoted in my group while I was there. And I was like, how in the world, everybody it's a lifer. They call them lifers. Like, you go to work for these companies forever. Like, people who were working there for 40 years. And I'm like, holy cow, I don't know if I can do that. So, I kind of stepped back and I looked at, what other people were doing. And I was working on a really, really big project. And I was watching the project managers. So they have specific people that just manage the builds of these airplanes. And I started talking to them and asking them what they do. And they all were businessmen. Some of them were engineers, but they were all businessmen. So they all had a master's degree in business. And I was like, that's what I have to do. You just look around and you're like, the only way to get ahead anymore as an engineer is to have a business degree. And so at that point, I kind of decided, okay, I guess I got to go back to school. And that's when I went back to the same undergrad college that I went to get my MBA to become a project manager. And I specifically went there to learn, business practices, accounting, finance. Didn't really care about the marketing side because, again, I had already decided what I wanted to go into. And so you had mentioned briefly that this first summer of that 2-year program, you have to have an internship. It's actually required to do that. And I had a position lined up at a aerospace company in Dallas Love Field, the smaller airport here, that does corporate jet interiors. So talk about a cool job. This was the company that designed the interior for the Mavs airplane, Mark Cuban's plane. And I was like, man, they do so much cool stuff. And, somebody buys a 737 from Boeing, green. They call them green because the primer is just green. And they just deliver them to this company. And then they spend hundreds of millions of dollars outfitting them with the most exotic woods and leathers and TV screens and beds and bathtubs. And I was like, this is awesome. And so I had a job lined up with them, but they didn't get the contract that I was going to be working on as a project manager, an intern. And so when that happened, they called me it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the summer break. And they were like, so we didn't get that contract, so you don't have a job. And then I looked around and I was like, holy shit, what am I going to do now? I don't have a backup plan. And so luckily, that was when I was at your shop a lot because I was having a lot of work done on my car pretty much all the time, the black car, pretty much all the time. And so you and I had sat down, or we were always kind of brainstorming of what kind of business opportunities are there in this market. And so you had the great idea of trying to figure out a better way to run the shop. Cause I had been, that was what I was doing, was project management. And so, the stars aligned and it worked out really well that I can come on board and try to run EVO-D, Evolution Dynamics. And so, that got me to the point where we could at least see how things are, but, we can get into my failure is trying to do it. Why I wasn't good at it, it's because you mentioned, it's so hard to run a shop. And I don't think people really realize the time and the effort and the stuff you have to do to run a performance shop as a small business owner who also works in the shop. So, it's really hard. And we can go into it later, like kind of the details about it.
Yeah, and that actually may be some cool content for future uses, to actually have you go in and explain to people how hard it is to run a shop and why is it hard. And that would be really cool.
Yeah.
So do you think of yourself as an entrepreneur, Todd?
Yeah, definitely. I was like looking at this. I was like, I've grown up with an entrepreneurial mind for almost my entire life. I guess probably my entire life. Both my dad's dad started a business. It was kind of a bearing housing, like not wheel bearings, but ball bearing housings. Did a lot of machine work in Lubbock, where I grew up. And so my dad and his brother took that business over from him, and it was a plastic injection molding company. So rather large business. And so I had kind of been experienced with entrepreneurship my whole life. Like it just, kind of in your blood kind of deal when you get to be around it and you get to see, the struggles of running your own business and the difficulties of it all. And so, yeah, like, as a little kid, do the typical like shoveling snow and picking up leaves kind of stuff, at really young. I never really had a lemonade stand, but I think a lot of people, that's what they do. My first like real business was a mobile car washing business. We had a trailer with a big tank of water and a pressure washer and a generator, essentially, just going around washing people's cars. And that one was like, cash business. In high school, I could make $100 on a sunny Saturday. And I was like, holy, like that's great money back then. And then, yeah, like, after college, getting into that engineering job, and seeing how hard it was really to move up, you get pigeonholed into these things. And even if you like it, it's just not, you don't have any power. I would just take a damage report out of a stack of stuff and work on it. I didn't have any planning. I didn't have any like real, some like fun stuff to do with these. It was always like, okay, fix this problem. And so like, it was just really, really bad with that. And, that helped me get into the grad school stuff. And so, my next venture was one that you briefly touched on, was the traffic optimization system. The traffic light deal with the cell phones to do the traffic lights. And I was like, that idea was so cool that you had with your buddies at Lockheed. And so one thing I can add to that was really my first business. So at the grad school I went to, they had a business plan competition. And I actually, you and I entered this business into the business plan competition and like had like high hopes for it and thought it was so cool because it is really cool, but totally underestimated the scope of this project. And when I pitched that in front of all the investors and like, I don't know how many people, maybe 100 people, I just totally flopped. Like, it was a disaster. And I'm like afraid to watch the video that they recorded of that, just because I just remember being so nervous because, if you're not prepared, you're not going to do well. And we ended up getting dead last in that. And I was like, I felt so bad because I was like, I just ruined this idea, like totally messed that one up. But, learned from that experience. And one, like another really cool idea that you also had was I call it the Sea-Doo Kamikaze. That one was like super cool because this was like 08.
Yeah, I was still at Lockheed for sure, yeah. So you were still out there, and this was when piracy was like really bad. Like every day some ship in the Bering Sea or somewhere over in the Middle East was Somalia.
Somalia was getting attacked, and you were like, we're going to build this Sea-Doo that's remote control with cameras, and it's going to have like spikes and armor plating, and you're just going to drop it from your ship and ram it into their dinghy that they're trying to attack you with. And I was like, that is the coolest idea ever. And I wish, then they started, you didn't need it because then they started having like gunners on the ships. But that one was always a lot of fun that I liked. And so like, our latest entrepreneurial venture is My Shop Assist. And so, diving more into how that got started, after that summer that I was working with you when we hashed out the idea, the second year of my MBA, I actually took it it was a 2-part class of writing a business plan. And a business plan in and of itself is a enormous undertaking. And I spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours writing this business plan, and it ended up being, I don't remember, it was 50 or 70 or 80 pages worth of information, financial projections, market research, org charts, like all kinds of like really businessy stuff that, I really liked doing that at the time, and I had the opportunity to do it at a class. And so I spent all that time doing that business plan, and then we entered my shop assist into the business plan competition the next year and won. So that was really the thing, it validated that idea, like, oh man, like these 5 like venture capital super successful businessmen just said that our plan was good, and like that helps out a lot versus the year before they all said, holy cow, that plan is awful. And, like that was a big boost for us to figure out, like, it's just validating the idea. It's a proof of concept that, like, if you can convince business people that this is a good idea, then we can actually make it a business. And so that's, that was a big push for us. And that was really, really nice when that happened.
Yeah. And one thing I really like about the business plan you wrote is for people who haven't ever written one for their business, it is an excellent exercise. And we should be clear that when you write a business plan, it does not mean you have to follow it, because our MSA business plan that you spent hundreds of hours writing in however long it is, even within about a year, all the financial projections were already wrong. And so it takes time to keep up with it in addition to just writing it. And so it's pretty important to have, and it's a great exercise to do so you understand the business. But don't use it as a Bible of how to run your business.
Yeah, and I think the best thing I ever heard from the professor that was teaching that class was that a business plan, you write a business plan to not do a business. Like, you do all the research to not mess up. Like, that's really the thing. Like, you do the market research to find out, like, oh, there is not a big enough market for this. Or, you do some financial planning and you go, wow, there is no way I'm going to be able to do X dollar revenue just to stay afloat. And, there were several people that were in that class that wrote the business plan and were like, I am so glad I did this, because I was going to get into, I was going to do this business and was going to spend, maybe $100,000 to get started. And they were like, I wouldn't have made it 6 months. And so, it's kind of funny to think about that. Like, you're looking for a reason to not do a business. And so it's kind of backwards from what you think a business plan would do. But yeah, having gone through that exercise and then validating the idea was like super, super cool for us. So I'm glad we participated in that and did well the second year around.
So you quit your job pretty much cold turkey, and it really was not a transition. You just dropped it and went to school then, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I did not take the conventional entrepreneurship move. It was more out of necessity than it was out of planning. So I had quit my job to go back to school to do a different job, and then that didn't pan out. So, got us to where we are today, which has been a roller coaster ride of excitement. But I didn't do the transition out just because that my opportunities were in a different direction, doing that.
So after you finished your MBA, why didn't you just go to work for somebody else? What made you want to keep going forward with MSA or risking it all on your own company?
I think, it's just a lot of fun to work for yourself. Working for somebody else can be really good because you've got other people that are thinking of the big stuff. So you just get to go into work, do your job, and go home. And there's a lot to be said for doing that. Like, if you want to make a paycheck and you want to, just live happily and just kind of go by your day, like, do it, man. Like, you can do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, a lot of people get into it, and they just, if you hate your job, and you don't have to work there, like, you can do other stuff. And so, like, I do definitely miss, what I consider the guaranteed paycheck. You could get fired, but, walking in every day, and as long as you put your hours in, you could get the money, you get your paycheck. But it's just not the same as having the ability to, like, you wake up in the morning and you go, okay, like, I've got all these things to do today, but I want to go do them. So yeah, I think working for somebody else has its benefits for sure. It's job security, and like the paycheck and the money are going to be a lot better. But the personal satisfaction is not nearly the same. Not nearly the same. So I'd say just working for yourself has a lot of upside to it, minus the financial risk that you take. But it's very rewarding, and it's a lot of fun.
So tell us about your role at MSA. What do you do? How do you interact with shops?
So you and I we're 50-50 partners in MSA, and you'll read every single thing you'd ever want, like partnerships are hard, or you shouldn't do it, or you should do it. But I feel personally, you and I brought totally different backgrounds into this business, and that's why it works so well. You have a lot more expertise in the shop world, and then I have a lot more, at least, experience with the professional financial side. And so, like you and I being partners in this helps out, because we can divide and conquer on a lot of stuff. And there's going to be difficult times, but that you just have to look at it and set clear boundaries of who's going to be doing what. And so that's why, I think it was like a couple weeks ago, I had read the E-Myth Revisited, and the E-Myth is the Entrepreneur Myth Revisited. And one of the things he set out was just, the author was just saying, like, you have to make clear roles for people. And that's what we did. We were like, we're both doing the same stuff, and it's a lot of work. And so we split up pretty much the roles pretty equally. So I handle the accounting, so all the QuickBooks stuff. I do the advertisement, so I design the flyers and go to organize the convention trips and stuff. And then my big new task that I'm still kind of trying to figure out into is the new customer acquisition. So I'm kind of in charge of getting new people started on it, telling them about MSA, getting them started on the trial, walking them through it. And then I also do all the tutorial videos, how to use the software and stuff like that. And then, on your side, we were like, okay, well, what are you better at? Well, you being a shop owner, you can help Reid with the Do It for a Living podcast. And since you come from a software background, you can do new feature development. And since you love Facebook so much, you can do social media. And so, and then you talk with all the existing customers to help them through the steps.
Tech support.
So, yeah, it's tech support. Yeah. So when you call, if you're a user and you call, you're probably going to get to Kevin first. So, like setting those clear roles has, it's definitely going to help us moving forward, so that we can tackle the work. Tackle the work equally and try to get as enough stuff done as we can.
And what's really fun is being a partnership with us being from pretty different backgrounds. It is not always daisies and roses, just to let people know. Me and Todd do argue over a lot of things. It's quite entertaining to see too. But
Richard, your other tuner, he always gets a chuckle whenever we bicker or butt heads at the shop.
Yeah, but what it does is it allows us to get the other perspective that if you're very complacent and very agreeable, you don't ever get that other perspective. And so it helps, in my opinion, it helps the business grow. And that's kind of important to have with a partnership, being able to say what you think. And you are better at that than I am.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's something I work on, is like I consciously know that I'm really blunt, and I'm like, okay, how do I phrase this so I don't sound like an asshole? But I usually still sound like an asshole. But that's part of it. Like, you got to work through it. I've seen a lot of shops not be able to do that. I mean, it's communication. It's just like any other relationship. Like the communication is key. And, going into a venture as a shop, going into a partnership can be really, really difficult, because it's normally, I don't have any data behind this, but I'd say it's one mechanic, who's really good at working on cars, and then it's another guy who has money and can fund it. And I don't think they ever set clear boundaries or contracts of like who's going to do what, and then they just do different stuff, and it always ends up like blowing up in their face. So, setting those clear goals can go a long way if you're thinking of doing a partnership or if you're in a partnership in a shop right now.
So this takes us to the Do It For a Living podcast and kind of how we got involved with it. So how can the things you have learned through MSA help the Do It For a Living listeners?
So like our main goal, and I mean, especially my main goal is I want people to do better. I want shops to be better run. And so like I visited literally hundreds of shops over the years, and seen good ways to do things and like really, really bad ways to do things. And, the reasoning for that is because there is no standard. You get into this business with enthusiasm and you focus on working on the cars and not any of the other stuff. And so, these cars are projects and you got to keep track of everything that they all do. And I want to help shop owners do better. Like that's essentially what, like my goal is with Do It For a Living is like give people new ideas and better ways to do things. Because, when I went back to school for project manager, these were for multi-$100 million aerospace contracts. Like that's what we were going to be working on. And project management was so important that they had an entire team of people that did nothing but project management. Like I know these are big planes, but you scale it down to a car. And when we were working there, we would have daily meetings, and I always think like how ridiculous this is, but we'd have daily status meetings with 30 to 40 people just to talk about how the plane was doing. And you're like, okay, well, there's 30 people here. We're probably charging the customer like, I don't know, maybe $100 an hour per hour at least.
I think it's a lot more than that.
It's probably a lot more. Probably as us lowly engineers. Like, I mean, some of the guys were probably charging $300 or $400 an hour. And I was like, this is tons and tons of money that's going into this plane just to keep track of it. And then, you go to shops and you're like, nobody has any idea like what's going on to this stuff. And so like, the time spent from an engineering standpoint, on these big aerospace contracts was way more than I see at the shops. And, shops can't do what the aerospace companies were doing. And so like we were using things called Gantt charts, Gantt, I think is how that's spelled. And so what that is it's really it's a dependency based, step system to track what's going on. So like the horizontal axis is time. So it's usually days, weeks, months, could be years depending on the project. And then the vertical axis was just a list of different tasks and they were all dependent on each other. So, kind of moved from top left to bottom right, as things went on. And so like, they'd always say like, we don't want to slide the scale to the right because going to the right meant taking longer, like, pushing it out. And so looking at that, they had teams of people that did nothing but update that Gantt chart every single day. And as a shop, like there's no way, like you can't plan your day out to that level of detail without spending all day doing it. You need an entire overhead person to handle one shop that does like, I don't know, 10 or 15 cars a month. If you wanted to do a Gantt chart system, like it would be just awful. And now you guys were using that with the Formula SAE though, right?
Yeah, I used it as the team captain and we had 17 people on it and several hundred tasks for the one car. And even still, it was always behind. Nobody updated it and it was very cumbersome to manage. So.
Yeah, and the thing with Gantt charts is it's for one project. Like it's to manage a bunch of people doing one project. It's not to manage a bunch of projects with a handful of people working on them. So like it just doesn't that system doesn't scale down, I guess, really to like, a shop mindset. It just doesn't work. And so that's why we came along and we wanted to make something that is for performance shops that's not as time detailed like that, because it's all flowing and nothing seems to match up as well as as how those Gantt charts work when there's a team of people doing it. So, yeah, like again, like the whole point here is to educate shop owners to become, more efficient, doing it. If you do everything the same way that you've been doing it, you're not going to get different results. You're going to get the same thing. So throwing more hours at the problem just means you're going to have more problems. And so, that's why we want to teach, and educate the Do It for a Living community about how, like, there's better ways that we can run businesses like the performance shops. And so really want to get that out there and have the community, kind of step back and think like, hey man, like maybe there's a better way to do it that doesn't involve, whiteboards and printed invoices and brute force. Yeah. If you do it differently, it could be better. And so like, that's why we want to help people, kind of learn these business practices that have been around forever that just never kind of, I've just seen very few shops that have implemented more advanced tactics on operating the business because everybody's so excited to work on the cars, and that's the fun part. But if you're disorganized, then you can't really enjoy doing that as much.
So what kind of plans do you have to contribute to the Do It for a Living podcast? We kind of mentioned this in the intro that Reid, you, and myself are all going to be content contributors. What are you going to be putting together for us so listeners can look forward to?
Oh yeah, I'm so excited to get to do some of this stuff because I really like a lot of these topics. Like you said, you and Reid are going to be doing the typical interviews. Like getting people's backgrounds and doing the topic-based stuff and all the nitty-gritty stuff. And then what I want to do is I'm kind of compiling a bunch of topics to cover and just contribute to the podcast, probably as an additional episode. They'll probably be quite a bit shorter. I don't know if I'll cap the amount of time, but I'm thinking maybe like as little as 15 minutes, probably no more than 30 or 35, just little business tips kind of stuff. And I want to be doing like various topics specific to the aftermarket and performance shop owners. And so, most likely, I've got some stuff like actual tool reviews. So you'd mentioned like the circlip injector. I want to go through and put some numbers behind why you should buy this tool if you are assembling engines, pistons and rods that have the circlips. Like, how many does it take to make this tool pay off, and how much time does it actually save each one? Like going into that detail for people to start thinking about that in their shop. I want to do book reviews, so they get mentioned a lot in the podcasts. You'll find that with every podcast. People normally have a book, that they'd like to mention, but I want to kind of, I read all these books or I listen to them on audio, and I want to kind of give a synopsis, the pros and cons of the book. Like, was it any good? How will it help you? So that you can decide if you want to listen to it or if you just kind of want to read the Cliffs Notes, that kind of stuff within your decision to read books. And Reid even mentioned Ready, Fire, Aim in your podcast, and that's like, it's a super short book. It's like 50 or 60 pages, and it's just it's a motivational book on like going out there and doing it. It's like, that's somewhat applicable. It is not applicable to starting a business, but it's applicable to stuff you're doing within the business. And then lastly, probably some like business tips stuff. There's a lot of talk of like, email lists or like pros and cons of selling parts online. So, people talk about it in the podcast, and I want to go and kind of give a little bit more, maybe like more like a business eye on how those things work.
And you said you're also going to be working on a webinar series for people who want to start an automotive business, not for people who are already doing it, but this is for people who want to get started, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the, starting a business is extremely difficult, and that's what that business plan that I did was so important. And so I've got a lot of work into doing an essentials of opening a shop, something kind of like that, to how I think, or we think, you should go about getting into this industry if you want to. And a lot of it is based on kind of a new business model in the last few years, which lo and behold is how you started your business, where you build a community, you build a following, people who quote unquote know, like, and trust you. And then you open your shop. So you build up like this following in your community where people come to you for answers and installs and advice, and you just kind of slowly transition into charging them for that service. And you do a lot of work. You do a lot of legwork before you ever start renting a building. Because once you make that plunge, like, you are committed. And so I want to kind of give people an outline of, hey, like, think of all this stuff before you go purchase a building and buy a lift or make the enormous investment of purchasing a dyno. Like, there's a lot of stuff to think about, and it's really exciting, but you got to step back and take it slow and make sure you're not going to end up blowing $100,000 in 3 months. So, I've been working on that, and we'll see. It's probably going to be a couple of months before that comes out, but you never know. So I'll keep working on it.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that one. Another project we touched on in the last podcast with myself and Reid was Essentials of Operating a Shop class, and that was a little bit to do with Ben Strader. So what is that, and where can people find more information on it?
So Ben Strader, man, like, he is just amazing with the tuning side. Really like what he's done with EFI University, and he's making a lot of changes and improving the business constantly. And so, we liked what he's doing with it. And, we look up to him as an industry expert for helping people learn to tune, taking a lot of the guesswork out of it and giving you the foundation to go on your own and learn, a specific platform. And so, we approached him of like, hey, like, we kind of think we have an idea to add another class to your repertoire, to your schedule. And we want to do like how to operate a shop, like take what we've learned, put it into a seminar format for a day, and discuss subjects for shop owners, like business related stuff. So like how to best go about handling your accounting, when is the right time to hire people? How do you do marketing nowadays? All kinds of like really cool business related activities that are specific to this industry. Because, we want to provide owners with the knowledge that we've gained and to help them run their business better. And this one-day seminar is going to be like the perfect way to do it. So we've done 2 full practice classes here in Dallas with just the response has been amazing. And then we did we just kind of decided last minute to do one at PRI this year. And it was really funny because I tell people we rented a class for 50. You had said you were hoping for 20 people, and then we lost count at over 100. And so like when we saw that, we were like, man, like this is totally going to work. Like this, people want information, and like we have a lot of good stuff. And so we are going to be we're doing 12 classes in 2016 in various cities around the country. So we're kind of traveling all over to hit some of the big metroplexes for this. And if you want to find out more information, everything is listed through the EFI website. So that's EFI101.com. And then you look for the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. So that's what the name of it is. And, since this is the first year doing it, we're really excited about it. But, we want to get a lot of people to go to it, obviously. So we've come up with a coupon code specifically for the Do It for a Living listeners, where you can get $50 off the registration fee if you use the coupon code DIFAL. So the acronym for Do It for a Living. If you type that in, if you decide you want to go to one of the classes and you type that in when you're checking out, you'll get $50 off the registration fee. So that's a way we want to give back to the Do It for a Living community, a little financial benefit. And so the class is normally $495 for the full day. So it's a 9-hour class, or I guess it could be as long as we need to, discuss stuff with everybody. We provide lunch. We provide you with, a pamphlet that you can take with you, like a book where you can take notes and take with you. So we give you all the information. But if you sign up early, 30 days early on his website, it's only $395. So you get $100 off if you sign up a little early. So if you use that coupon code, it adds on top of that. So it's down to $345 for a class. I think we're capping it at 15 people. where we run you through a lot of cool business ideas and tips and tricks and stuff that'll help you make your run your business better. So yeah, if you're interested in that, just go to EFI101.com and then look up the Essentials of Operating a Shop class.
Awesome. And yeah, it's a pretty exciting class. I have taught 2 of them and the one at the PRI show. And so I think people will get a lot from them. In the classes moving for 2016, both Todd and myself will be teaching. It's about half and half. So he's teaching half of them. I'm teaching half of them. So be sure to check that out. So Todd, what's something you struggle with in business and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so this gets back into my struggle with trying to manage EVOD, and it's something as basic as my memory. I am terrible at remembering stuff like dates, names, schedules. Like, I can't do it. I don't know what it is. I've tried learning stuff and I just can't do it. So whenever I came on at EVOD, I couldn't keep anything straight. Like, I couldn't remember who I had talked to. I couldn't remember whose car was whose. I couldn't remember what parts we had ordered, like nothing. And the problem was that you, as a owner operator, you remembered all of it. You know, I don't remember how many cars you had, but you know, you had several people working for you, and you could remember which clutch was going on which car and when you had ordered it and when that person was coming in. And I was like, I can't remember this at all. And there were no processes put in place to offload that data anywhere. And so like we struggled real bad, and I was always like leaning on you to figure out what's going on, and I just couldn't do it. Like, it just totally flopped in the shop. And I think, that's how everybody runs their business when they're small, is they just remember. Like, you can always remember what's going on, but I don't have that skill. And so I couldn't do it. And so that's what I really struggle with. And so even to this day, like, I have to make lists. So I know I just use the notes function on my phone, but it's good enough for what I need to do. And then I just go through, and every day I just delete the stuff that I finished. And so, MSA is super important to me in that aspect, for keeping track of stuff, because I can put their information into the system. I can schedule their job. I can add the tasks. I can add the parts. I can mark when they're ordered, and I don't have to worry about remembering anything. Like, that's the thing. I can free up my mind to do other stuff instead of remembering, remedial tasks or when somebody is coming in. Like, I just have it all there. And so, that struggle with my memory, my short-term memory not being that great, it fixes all of that with this system. And so, like, it's been a big help for me whenever I'm trying to organize stuff in the shop as well.
And don't feel bad, because turns out I wasn't remembering everything either.
yeah. Like that gets into you. Yeah, you weren't perfect at it. That gets into you forgetting to put our big example, like fuel pumps, on the bill. You're rushing, and you do it, and then you forget. And so, like, that forgetting those parts, you, like you said, you may think you know what you're doing, but until you step back and you try to measure it, you don't see it, because you just don't know, or you don't want to think about it or something like that. But you forget that $80 part that you charge $100 for. Well, that money comes out of your bottom line. Like, that is not that money falls all the way to the profit line. Like, it passes everything, because you've already paid for it. You already paid the $80 for it. So it didn't cost you $80. It cost you $100. And when you're making $20 on a part, you now have to sell 5 more of those parts just to make up for losing that one. And like, you step back and you think about that, and you're like, holy cow, I sell, 50 fuel pumps a year, but if I give a handful of them away, I've essentially only sold 20, or something like that. And like, those numbers sound really crazy until you step back and you're like, yikes, I'm not only losing the cost, but I'm losing the profit as well. And it just takes a lot of parts to make up for that. And you start looking at a part that you make 5 or 10% on that you give away, and it takes a year of selling that part just to make up for the one that you lost. And so, like, keeping lists and keeping track of that stuff is so important.
Do you have a 1 or 5 year plan for MSA, or a big, hairy, audacious goal maybe?
Yeah. So for the 1 year goal, I'm really just super excited about the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. Like, I want I love teaching people. I love helping people. I love answering questions about running their business. So like my big push is to get all these classes filled. Like I really, really feel like this is going to be a success, and I really think that people are going to get a lot out of it. So that's my 1 year goal for sure, is to like, get people excited about this class and get them all filled up. Like the big, hairy, audacious goal, like a 5-year goal. I really want MSA to be in every single shop. Like it's such a great tool that I think, once people kind of see how it works and, see the benefits of it, they love it. Like everybody loves it that uses it. So, we always come out with new stuff, and, you may have seen it a couple years ago and when it was really basic. And so now we've got a lot more features. And, we always want to make it better and want to appeal to more shops. And so like, that's kind of the big goal, is to get everybody using this system as kind of an industry standard for managing your shop.
And it makes it easier for shops to know how to run their business when everybody does it the same way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So we like to take action at Do It for a Living. Can you suggest one action item for our listeners that they can improve their situation this week?
So I love this question because it's a physical thing that people can do, going forward. I definitely take my action item from the book, The Goal. In that book, he calls him a Herbie. He's got a story of a Boy Scout hiking story where there was like a little chubby fat kid who was walking really slow, and his name was Herbie. And he kept on slowing everybody down because they'd go and then they'd have to wait, and then they'd go and they'd have to wait. So they stuck Herbie at the very front of the pack, and figured out that, he's the slowest one. So, they found the problem, and then they started unloading stuff from his pack. And so he sped up. And the whole benefit here is like, he was the bottleneck. And so that bottleneck is the thing that slows your process down. And what you want to do is you want to improve on that process, like that single worst part. If you improve everything else, it doesn't matter because you're not improving the slowest thing. So, it's like, they say that a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Like that's how a shop works too. If you've got one process that's really slow, it doesn't matter how much you improve the other ones. It's still going to be slow. And so, for you, like a specific example that we looked at with you was machine shops. Like you were taking stuff and, it'd take 1 or 2 days to take it out of the car and disassemble it, when an engine blew up. And then, you could get it to the machine shop within a week. And you could put it, when you got everything back, you could have it like ready to go, broken in, tuned in like 2 weeks. But the problem was it was taking 4, 5, sometimes 8 months to get stuff back from machine shops. So it didn't matter how fast you got it out of the car. It was still going to take 8 months to get it back in. So, like your short-term or your fix was to kind of spread the load around to find other shops, and you improve, you lower the time spent on that one really awful task, and you can cut the amount of time it takes to do an engine rebuild in half. So, that's why I want people to kind of step back and take a look at their shop and see like, what one thing is really holding us back? Is it maybe that, it takes too long to get stuff into the shop, like parts or something like that. Or maybe one thing in your fabrication process, is really bad, or you spend a lot of time doing on it. Like try to fix that one thing and it'll significantly increase your throughput. So the amount of work that actually comes in and out. And so your revenue is directly tied to your throughput. So if you can increase that, you're going to make more money. And, again, your time is so valuable that you want to make as much money as possible in the lowest amount of time. So having a bunch of cars sitting around waiting on literally one specific thing is really bad. That's super expensive. So fix that thing, and then you can try to get the time down as a whole.
Very good. I really like that one a lot too. That's a good action item for listeners to take. Okay, so we're going to move on to the quick answer questions, Todd. Give us a game-changing product that you've seen in the last year.
So I definitely love the self-driving cars. I know that's not a performance thing, but I just think that's awesome. With the Tesla already doing it, they're putting tens of thousands of miles a day self-driving now. I think that's a super game changer as far as fuel efficiency for like semi trucks, like old people. Like, you know, I have a grandma and she's turning 96 this year and she still drives. Like, she can physically drive. She's like totally with it, super cool, but she drives at half of the speed limit and it's terrifying. And I'm like, you look at, you know, old people and you're like, most of the people, not most, maybe a lot of the people in homes, like old folks' homes are there because they can't get themselves around. Like, they can't go to the store. They can't get their hair done or they can't run errands. And so they go to these homes so that people can take care of them. But I'm like, if they could just hop into a car and it just goes wherever they tell it to go, they could live at home. And so I think like self-driving cars, I think that technology is so cool. And it's not going to affect, you know, the layman cars. I'm not really worried about that. But, you know, I think that's a really, really cool idea. And I'm excited to see, you know, what comes out of it moving forward.
What software programs are you using daily?
So obviously I'll do my, you know, my plug for My Shop Assist for sure. You know, I still use that almost every day to manage the shops. So love it. Can't get enough of it. I don't know what I would do without it. But pretty typically I use, you know, QuickBooks for the accounting. It's just, you know, it's the ubiquitous one for everybody for accounting. I do some 2D drafting, so I use SolidEdge for that. I use Inkscape for designs, so that's what I design all of our flyers for. It's like a free, you know, file generator for a vector file generator. And then for the CAM software, I use a software called SheetCam, and again, that's another free one that I use on our plasma table. You know, to cut stuff out. So I like that SheetCam a lot. You know, the CAD to CAM software it's a lot of fun doing that stuff.
So what apps are you using daily?
So like, you know, I've read a whole bunch of, you know, articles and stuff about, you know, it's good to relax a little bit. So I play this game called Two Dots. I literally play it all the time where you connect dots, literally colored dots. And it's like, it's so meaningless, you know, like just a stupid little task to do. But, you know, getting a little break is always good. So like I use that as an excuse, like, oh, I'm trying to educate my brain, you know, with all these articles that I've read. So yeah, I use this little game called Two Dots. It's kind of stupid, but you know, it's just something that I don't use any like business professional apps or anything like that.
And what's your favorite shop tool?
So yeah, I absolutely love our 4-foot by 4-foot CNC plasma cutter. I don't nearly utilize it enough, but when I do use it, it is awesome. So it, you know, we bought that. That was kind of a whim one that I would not probably purchase nowadays, but it's just such a fun, cool tool to cut flat plate sheet out. And so you make brackets, and we've done a couple intercooler end tanks, not a lot though, but you know, suspension components, lots of little flat plate stuff, and I'm getting into more of the artistic stuff as well. So, you know, it's so versatile to be able to cut out anything. And like, we make little tabs, and I can draw them, cut them, and prep them in less time that I could like trace them out by hand onto a piece and put it in the bandsaw. So I just absolutely love that CNC plasma cutter, and I'm really trying to use it a little bit more come next year.
And what kind of car are you driving right now?
Yeah, so I do so much driving around the country visiting shops that I have the Lexus Prius. It's the CT200H, a bunch of letters and numbers that they jumbled together for no reason. But I just, you know, it's really roomy, it's efficient, it's something that I can get around with very easily. So I just want something comfortable, you know, to get to and from the shop and to and from work every day. And then I bet I put 20, maybe 25,000 miles on it in 2015. Like, I drove it so much that I just needed something efficient. Didn't want something really inefficient and uncomfortable like an Evo. So I got something that's a little bit nicer.
So let's close this thing out. Todd, what do you think the future of automotive performance is going to be?
You know, I love the electric car stuff. I was having this discussion with my dad over the holiday break, like, you know, is it going to go to electric cars? And then I'm just like, you know, I think it was Tony Paolo mentioned, like, the SEMA Product of the Year award last year was a freaking carburetor. So, you know, the future of performance, it's going to just keep getting more efficient, and it's just going to get it's going to get more technical. It's going to get more technical no matter what. And so I think the level of education that's going to be needed to work on these cars is going to continue to advance. It's going to go by the wayside as it already is now, where you can't just go in and modify something. Like, you're going to have to need almost an engineering degree just to work on these cars. And so, looking at it from a business aspect, like, that's just another thing you're going to have to deal with if you own a performance shop and you want to work on these cars. Is like, it's just one more thing that's going to be added to your plate. And so, looking at it moving forward, I want people to be able to, focus less and less and less on the business and more and more and more on the cars. And so I think that's really what's going to be doing it moving forward, is just the technology advances. And we'll see how the electric cars play out. I mean, there's always going to be people hot rodding those as well. So, it's going to get into lightness. So you're going to be using composites and advanced materials, and it's going to be getting into aerodynamics because, the drag coefficient of the Tesla is ridiculously low. And it's really hard to make that thing any more efficient. But if somebody wants to make a fast one, that's what they're going to have to do, is like change the batteries out, up the motors, and reduce the weight. Like, that's really what they're going to have to do. So again, that's all going to be electrical engineering and mechanical engineering based. So it's just getting more and more professional. So
how do we connect with you and your company?
So you can email me at todd@myshopassist.com if you have any questions or anything. And then you can also go check out our website at myshopassist.com. So that has all the information about our software, and then the tutorial videos and how you can sign up. And then again, if you're interested in taking one of the Essentials of Operating a Shop class, one of those seminars, you can go to EFI101.com and then just click on the there's a classes drop down, a courses drop down, and then just look for the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. So all of that will be going through Ben Strader and his EFI University class.
Awesome. And so everything you've heard in this podcast today can be found on our doitforaliving.net page. So make sure you check it all out there. We'll have all the information that Todd has provided and links to different programs and stuff that he's used on there. Also, just remember that both myself and Todd will be contributing to the podcast moving forward with Reid. So if you hear a podcast from me, don't be surprised. It's just going to happen. And if you hear one from Todd, that's going to happen as well. So once again, thanks for listening, and have a good day.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously.